Have any of y'all ever had someone ruin your life or a period of your life because of abusive power, or have you ruined someone else's period of their life because of your abusive power? Well, let me tell you my example. I'm going into my freshman year of high school, and my dad gets this job in Florida in the summer. And so he is in Florida for 6 months, and my older brother moves there for a little bit right before me, and then I moved there to start school there because the plan was to get everybody down there. Well, I moved down there for a month and a half and start my football year in ninth grade. And I played 2 games. And when I come back home after the second game, my dad tells me that the boss of the company that he had moved had been irresponsible with his money, and the company was going under. And we had to move back to Mississippi. And something that I think y'all need to know is that my 8th grade year, I couldn't play football either. So I had went 2 years and only playing 2 football games. You see, we have examples of power right here. The boss of a company, the owner of the company, making irresponsible financial decisions and taking money from the company. That's abusive power. And then we have my dad using his power as head of the household to protect his family and play it safe. It's something that I didn't see coming. It's something unexpected. And yes, we see unexpected things happen throughout the Bible. And we don't see God working throughout a surface level, do we? Because we have our own divisions of power that we don't even think about God working through. If we were to watch a movie of Joash's life, you wouldn't even think about trying to find God throughout this. Because the division his family had because of power was so bad that his own family wanted to murder each other just to have the power. So we have on the screen here the family tree of Joash, and I want to explain all these boxes. The red boxes stand for corruption, abuse of power, and people who did not seek the righteousness of God. And the green boxes stand for people who seek the righteousness of God and people who are positive influences on Joash's life. And I just left Joash blue so that we could all see where he stands. But let's go to 2 Chronicles 22, 1 through 12. The people of Jerusalem made Ahaziah, Jehoram's youngest son, king in his place, since the raiders who had came with the Arabs into camp had killed all of the older sons. So Ahaziah, son of Jehoram, king of Judah, began to reign. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 1 year, while Jehu was executing judgment on the house of Ahab. He found the officials of Judah and the sons of Ahaziah's relatives, who had been attending Ahaziah, and he killed them. He went in search of Ahaziah, and his men captured him while he was hiding in Samaria. He was brought to Jehu and put to death. They buried him, for they said, he was the son of Jehoshaphat, who sought the Lord with all his heart. So there was no one in the house more powerful enough to retain the kingdom. A little side note, Baal was believed to be a god of power and fertility, and he had thunder in one hand, lightning in the other. And no idol is more powerful than God, but yet they believed that this idol, and this idol worshiping that they all did, could lead them to have more power than God. And they tried to seek all this power, and it led to their spiritual suicide. It can lead to your spiritual suicide, and sometimes even to your actual death. Picking back up in verse 10, when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to destroy the whole royal family of the house of Judah. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Jehoram, took Joash, son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the royal princes who were about to be murdered, and put him and his nurse in a bedroom, because Jehosheba, the daughter of King Jehoram and wife of the priest Jehoiada, was Ahaziah's sister. She hid the child from Athaliah so she couldn't kill him. And he remained hidden in that temple for 6 years while Athaliah ruled the land. So let's just summarize all of that up really quickly. Athaliah has just lost her son, Ahaziah, and now she immediately wants to go kill her grandson, Joash. And I don't see why Granny's Gone Wild has not made a killing off of this. I mean, That's her grandson who didn't even get to meet his dad, and she was already wanting to kill him. An innocent baby. But we see this in today's world too, don't we? Either parents not being there in their kid's life, or babies not making it because of pregnancy complications, or divorce because one person in the marriage wants more power and control than the other. This happens all the time. And I want to key in on one verse. 2 Chronicles 22, verse 7. God brought Ahaziah's downfall. But why would God do that? So, like I said, I've just summarized the very MTV family that we have in the Bible right here. But why is all of this happening? 2 Chronicles 23, 3b is a foreshadowing. Jehoiada said to them, the king's son shall reign, as the Lord promised, concerning the descendants of David. So God is active right here, working through this corruption. God is present in the people who seek power over him. God is present through this very messed up family. He sent someone to kill the corruption. He sent someone to kill the power hunger and make people hunger for him. When has God come to kill corruption in your life? When has God come to stop people from seeking all power? And is God trying to kill corruption right now? Are we living in such chaos that we don't even see God work anymore? The story of Joash starts with him being hidden in the temple by Jehoiada for 6 years while his evil grandma, Athaliah, ruled. And then she eventually gets stoned to death. Finally, corruption is ended, right? Joash can be king. His first order of business was to remodel the temple. And well, in order to remodel anything, you need some money. So turn to 2 Chronicles 24, verse 7. Now the sons of that wicked woman, Athaliah, had broken into the temple of God and had used its sacred object for the Baals. As long as Jehoiada lived, burnt offerings were presented continually in the temple of the Lord. So Joash's first order of business was to get this temple remodeled and repurposed, honestly, to make it to where people are worshiping God in the temple and not idols. So he first makes a tax to get people to pay for all these renovations and stuff. And you know, this looks very familiar, doesn't it? A new president gets in control and they have all the power, and the first thing they want to do is take your money. Well, after all the oppression that these people had been under the harsh ruling of Athaliah, they weren't going for it, having to pay money. So he goes and he gets a collection basket to be made and puts it outside the temple gate. So he's letting it fall into their hands. He's letting God's power take control of the situation. And sure enough, the money starts flowing and the renovations begin. And there were carpenters and professionals in iron and bronze there making new utensils for worship because the old ones had been removed. And I started thinking about how I relate to Joash, because I work for my dad in construction, and I'm often his project manager. You know, a project manager to make sure materials are at the job site and everything's going smoothly. And then it hit me. I'm supposed to be doing work for God every day. You're supposed to be doing work for God every day. It doesn't have to be remodeling a temple, but we have to be doing work for God every day. But we look at our life situation so surface level and say, oh, I'm too busy, or maybe later, or it can wait until Wednesday or Sunday. And sometimes it's, why is God doing this to me? Not, what is God trying to make out of me? It's also never, where is God at working on me? Or, God, who will I be able to relate to help them get closer to you? And during a lot of Joash's reign, Jehoiada was a big influence in his life. And if we have any Spider-Man fans in here, Jehoiada is Joash's Uncle Ben. And we all know what happens to Uncle Ben. He dies being a big influence in Peter Parker's life. And no, Joash and Peter Parker both had choices when this happened. You see, Peter Parker went out and he became the neighborhood's town hero. Joash did the complete opposite. Now, I'm not saying Joash should have been slinging around webs and fighting crime, but he should have been leading his people closer to God like he did when Jehoiada was there. 2 Chronicles 24, 17 through 25. After the death of Jehoiada, the officials of Judah came and paid homage to the king, and he listened to them. They abandoned the temple of the Lord, the God of their ancestors, and worshipped Asherah poles and idols. Because of their guilt, God's anger came on Judah and Jerusalem. Although the Lord sent prophets to the people to bring them back to him, and though they testified against them, they wouldn't listen. The Spirit of God came on Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada the priest. He stood before the people and said, "This is what God says. Why do you disobey the Lord's commands? You will not prosper, because you have forsaken the Lord, and he has forsaken you." But they plotted against him, and by order of the king, they stoned him to death in the courtyard of the Lord's temple. You know, the temple that Joash had just got done renovating and repurposing. He has just murdered his brother in the front lawn of it. King Joash did not remember the kindness Zechariah's father Jehoiada had shown him, but killed his son, who said as he lay dying, "May the Lord see this and call you to account." At the turn of the year, the army of Aram marched against Joash. It invaded Judah and Jerusalem and killed all the leaders of the people. They sent all the plunder to their king in Damascus. Although the Aramean army had come with only a few men, the Lord delivered into their hands a much larger army. Because Judah had forsaken the Lord, the God of their ancestors, and judgment was executed on Joash. When the Arameans withdrew, they left Joash severely wounded. His officials conspired against him for murdering the son of Jehoiada the priest, and they killed him in his bed. So he died and was buried in the city of David, but not in the tombs of the kings. So Joash doesn't know what to do without his only positive influence in his life anymore. He had all the power, and he went straight back to his family's roots, worshiping idols. And we see Israelites worshiping idols all throughout the Old Testament, and it's a continuous cycle. But why do people with power go against God? Do we sometimes think that we are God? Or that we're better than God? Power, power, power. Why do people in power ignore what other people tell them? Is it because they got caught out? Is it because people in power are afraid of people viewing them differently? Or is it because they think they're perfect and have no flaws? I don't really know what Joash thought, but he abandoned the temple that he had just remodeled and then murdered his brother in the front lawn of it. He turned and forsake God completely. And sometimes we need to take a deep breath and take some steps back and realize who's ultimately in power of our life. God had just sent an undersized army to defeat the king of Judah and kill corruption. God killed the people who abused their power. But the most interesting thing that stuck out to me is where Joash was buried. He wasn't buried with the kings who seeked God, but he also wasn't buried with the kings who didn't seek God. If you were a bad king, you were buried outside of the city of David. But he was buried in the city of David, which is the same city as the good king. But he wasn't buried with the good kings, which brings me to a very hard reality check. Joash ended up in middle ground on Judgment Day because of who he let influence him and how he abused his power as king. So who do we let have power and influence over us? Because no matter who you are, you have power and influence, whether you realize it or not. Everyone can pray and show your power and influence through Jesus Christ in that way. But everyone can also curse and say unholy things and have power and influence that way. Some of us have divorced parents, and we have power and influence to that brokenness to minister to people just like us. And some of us have a great home life. Both parents are active. And we have power and influence of how to parent our children and how to show other people. Everyone has power and influence. The question is, how will you let it define you? Who will you let have influence and power over you? And how will you use your power and influence to further the kingdom of God? Because I don't know about you, but I don't want to be like Joash on Judgment Day, not knowing where I'm fixing to go. I want to hear, well done, you good and faithful servant. What